After the Jeonggal unit devastated North Korean forces, the 52nd Infantry Brigade crossed the demilitarized zone. In that situation, Chinese private military company forces started to resist and block the 52nd Infantry Brigade, but the Jeonggal unit struck from behind and instantly wiped out an entire company of Chinese private military company troops. They ran through the mountains with Panzerfausts and anti-tank weapons. The Chinese private military company forces were instantly wiped out by an ambush in the area. A few hours ago, the demilitarized zone was filled with explosions and gunfire. Now, only silence and black smoke remain. Despite being midsummer, the area felt cold. Black smoke rose from several mountain ridges. It showed just how fierce this battle had been. Shell casings, drone wreckage, and the bodies of North Korean soldiers and Chinese private military company members were scattered everywhere on the ground. As they passed, soldiers from the Republic of Korea's 12th Infantry Division, 52nd Infantry Brigade, and Scorpion Unit made final checks. The current commander of the 6th Company, who was in charge of the battle, was hastily checking for survivors. There were a great number of casualties. The 6th Company commander of the 52nd Infantry Brigade spoke tiredly into the radio, giving orders. Though he was a company commander, he was a newcomer to society who had just turned 30. Being 30 is considered very young in society, yet he faced this terrible situation, his face covered in dirt and blood. His eyes were filled with fear and guilt. After all, dozens of soldiers had died because of his orders. This was after North Korean soldiers and Chinese private military company members withdrew. They moved to the rear to recover their comrades' bodies. After the battle, one side of the demilitarized zone was devastated. The smell of gunpowder covering the mountains still stung their noses, and broken bulletproof helmets and shattered firearms were scattered over the hot ashes. All around, there were bodies and shapes that could hardly be called human. Limbs lost to bombs and bullets, vanished faces, and bloody uniforms. Corporal Yoo Sung-hyun slowly walked through it, sometimes stopping. Corporal Yoo Sung-hyun and his friend, who enlisted together, had been close since middle school and served as comrades in the military. He was the one Yoo Sung-hyun had shared combat rations and jokes with the night before. Now, half his body was gone. His lower body was missing, blood stained the ground dark red, and his fingers were stiff as if frozen mid-grasp. This is what war was like. As long as there was war, it was equal to everyone, and it brought overwhelming emotions to anyone. But even so, there were a few people who breathed a sigh of relief. They said that if it weren't for the Jeonggal unit, we would have been wiped out, right? Senior members also shared KCTC training anecdotes. They discussed how the Jeonggal unit ran 45-degree mountain paths during KCTC and how 20 of them defeated 90 opponents. The Jeonggal unit moved between locations tirelessly. After flanking and defeating the North Korean army in the demilitarized zone mountains, the Jeonggal unit regrouped to advance north again. Jeonggal unit members checked equipment, cared for the wounded, and reflected on their successful operation. The Jeonggal unit is the KCTC Professional Opposing Force Regiment. They operate as the 2nd Sarang Brigade during wartime, and when they realized that the 12th Infantry Division was in danger, the 3rd Corps sent the Jeonggal unit to help. They possess incredible combat skills. KCTC training puts Jeonggal unit soldiers through 8 months of realistic combat, creating a major gap in combat skills compared to regular units. They use North Korean military tactics, and in this battle, those tactics overwhelmed the North Korean forces. It was an ironic sight. With help from the 52nd Infantry Brigade and Jeonggal unit, the 12th Division secured the Gyeodo area of the demilitarized zone and removed all obstacles set by North Korea. They then eliminated the remaining North Korean troops nearby. The operation lasted all day, with artillery units relentlessly targeting North Korean bases like Pyeongchang. They also observed the North Korean troops trying to retreat, and all of them were killed by the artillery shells. The Jeonggal unit eliminated the last North Korean soldiers and Chinese private military company members, also capturing 12 Chinese private military company members alive. However, 243 were dead or missing and 897 wounded. It was the first victory in battle for the 52nd Regiment, but there were too many casualties to rejoice over that fact. Casualties were so high they considered using a reserve force instead. With thousands of casualties in 4 days since the war began, anti-war sentiment slowly grew in Korea. Widespread dissatisfaction followed the mobilization order, and the military's inexperience caused major damage. In this situation, battles continued to break out near the demilitarized zone. There were a continuous stream of wounded people trying to come to the hospital, but there were definitely problems with the hospital facilities. If a mobilization order is declared, hospitals follow roles based on their level. In wartime, all rear general hospitals become military hospitals. Medical personnel like doctors and nurses are assigned to field hospitals or other facilities as needed during wartime. Currently, all 340 general hospitals in South Korea are paralyzed. There are also 37,543 clinics. With more injured arriving, these hospitals have reached capacity and can't take more patients. Additionally, North Korean military artillery attacks on the Seoul area caused some hospitals to lose heating fuel and electricity. Many hospitals became isolated by debris, losing access to medicine, food, and water. And the evacuation system wasn't properly established either. Wounded soldiers were supposed to be evacuated to the rear by medical evacuation aircraft, but due to ongoing battles and other issues, the aircraft couldn't take off, so they had to be transported by land. Quite a few of them died during the evacuation. Although many skilled doctors were mobilized, the shortage of specialists remained a major issue. Military hospitals had about 0.98 doctors per 1,000 soldiers. Our country had fewer than 1.3 doctors per 1,000 people, about a third of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development average of 3.7 and less than half of 2.6. This was during peacetime. Now, in wartime, many more doctors have arrived, but there still aren't enough, so they're overworked. Additionally, a shortage of nurses led to occasional medical accidents. It was chaotic. Some lives could have been saved, but weren't. If hospitals in the rear were like this, imagine the front lines. If anything, it was likely worse. The United States Defense Intelligence Agency kept collecting intelligence and was shocked by Kim Yo-jong's death in the South Korean military attack. At the same time, they were pondering who would be the next leader. The Defense Intelligence Agency was troubled because there were no remaining Baekdu bloodline members. Meanwhile, one person made a meaningful remark, saying that there might be one Baekdu bloodline member left under the South Korean National Intelligence Service. But more importantly, in order to keep disabling North Korea's nuclear weapons, they had to constantly know the whereabouts of North Korea's high-ranking officials. They had to keep eliminating North Korea's high-ranking officials to prevent the launch of nuclear weapons. The Defense Intelligence Agency kept debating whether or not to forget when providing the locations of North Korea's high-ranking officials. If North Korea's top officials kept dying, China could be provoked, and war with the United States might escalate, causing serious concern. Currently, South Korea was receiving a significant amount of help from the United States. The United States wasn't directly sending troops to advance north, but by providing massive support in non-combat areas like logistics, intelligence surveillance, and reconnaissance, they were helping South Korea conduct the war smoothly. This was such a huge help that people believed they could win the war, especially since they pinpointed the exact locations of North Korea's nuclear weapons and informed us North Korea didn't even have a chance to use their nuclear weapons. When North Korea's nukes were exposed, we bombed them immediately. If anyone with launch codes was caught, we bombed them too, stopping nuclear use. In South Korea, we gained an advantage when some North Korean soldiers joined us. Entire North Korean companies or battalions have surrendered at once in some demilitarized zone areas. China keeps signaling its desire to take over all of North Korea. Some North Korean generals and politicians were helping South Korea by providing information. Some joined New Joseon and shared even more information. This included all the current locations and facilities of the North Korean military, as well as detailed information about Chinese PMCs. All this information was gathered and proved to be a great help in devising strategies. It was as if the intelligence network on North Korea had returned to its former state. We could clearly see the situation in North Korea. China is reportedly leveraging remaining pro-Chinese factions to boost their numbers and appears focused on creating a collective leadership system with them. We also learned 2 more Chinese military brigades entered North Korea. They clearly aim to use North Korea to expand their influence in the Far East. This is the White House. In the Oval Office, people at the long table listened quietly to President Trump, their expressions unchanged. Outside, Washington, District of Columbia's calm sky contrasted with the tense atmosphere inside the meeting room. As the world watched the war between South Korea and North Korea, careful discussions were held here. President Trump viewed South Korea as an ideal tool to weaken China's power. President Trump aimed to weaken China and maximize benefits. His goal was that American soldiers should not shed blood in the process. The plan was to supply all weapons and aid to South Korea until China collapsed. The United States Secretary of Defense said President Trump supported making South Korea reliant on American weapons. President Trump also agreed to this. Some officials said that such a move could draw criticism from the international community, but they were quickly ignored. No one mentioned America's moral responsibility, which was frightening. In this meeting, only national interests were discussed. On that day, in the White House meeting room, not a single word was mentioned about the horrors of war in Korea or the sacrifices of civilians. Here, only numbers and calculations mattered. The United States pretended to support Korea while taking advantage behind the scenes. Battle traces remained in a 7th Division and 5th Infantry Brigade tent. Inside the dusty field barracks, soldiers were treating their wounds, maintaining their weapons, and preparing for the next operation. Amid the tension, an incident was drawing attention. The 5th Infantry Brigade captured a whole North Korean company in a recent battle. The prisoners were herded into one tent. Some of these prisoners were badly injured from the battle and needed immediate medical attention. Some sat dazed and trembling with fear, while the Republic of Korea soldiers guarding them were very hostile. They excessively interrogated prisoners for information. The interrogation began with simple questions, then escalated to torture and humiliation. I knew this situation was wrong, but I couldn't tell them to stop. I understood the soldiers' feelings. After seeing their comrades die in battles with the North Korean army, their anger and desire for revenge made sense to me. The 7th Division's legal officer saw this and told the soldiers that torturing prisoners violated the Geneva Convention, and he demanded that they release them immediately. At that moment, one of the soldiers suddenly started to talk back. Of course, he was muttering to himself though. The legal officer heard about this and threatened him, asking if he wanted to go to a court-martial. At this point, the company commander started to intervene. The company commander stopped the soldier from facing a court-martial. When the legal officer questioned his leadership, the commander responded calmly. This is a battlefield. He said that in a situation where comrades are dying and getting injured because of that one North Korean soldier, the law that says you have to treat prisoners politely is meaningless. He said we survived because of the information from that North Korean soldier. The legal officer stationed far from the front was visiting for the first time and was disconnected from the reality on the ground. However, due to his rank, the legal officer briefly halted the torture. However, the soldier's eyes were still filled with anxiety and anger. The prisoners of war let out a deep sigh of relief that someone had helped them, but their fate was still uncertain. It was a moment when the conflict between law and war was clearly revealed. After all, they were human beings with feelings too. Torture of prisoners of war occurred across the front lines, but the Geneva Convention could not be ignored. If torture videos spread abroad, Korea would face strong international criticism. This moment made people question morality in the war. Houses, the 15th Division and 39th Infantry Regiment battles continued here, resulting in many casualties. You could see everyone being evacuated, from those who had lost their limbs to those who couldn't fight properly anymore due to psychological trauma. Some witnesses seemed out of it too. The temporary field hospital looked like a scene from hell. Wounded soldiers groaned everywhere, and the air was so thick with blood and medicine it felt suffocating with every breath. It felt like the Grim Reapers were waiting to take people. Whenever soldiers carried in the wounded on wildflower stretchers, military doctors and medics worked tirelessly, but exhaustion and despair deepened on their faces. The voices of the soldiers who brought in the wounded were already hoarse. A soldier with his right leg blown off below the knee groaned in pain on the wildflower stretcher. He was bleeding so much his skin was deep red and soaked in blood. Before they could bandage him, bright red blood was already flowing. The soldier's trembling voice echoed in the tent. The medics had to treat them but were nearly out of blood packs and could soon provide no more care. With few painkillers and blood packs, the wounded kept arriving in waves. Limited equipment, medicine, and manpower restricted their efforts. The soldiers comforted each other before the next battle, while the medics, unable to save everyone, felt only despair at the grim reality. The medics were deeply frustrated by their inability to save people, but they had no choice but to continue. The medics knew better than anyone that if they stopped here, they really wouldn't be able to save anyone. Outside, the sound of artillery fire could still be heard. The sound and constant advance made the grim reality even more dramatic.
Korean subtitles by Han Hyo-ju.
Korean subtitles by Han Hyo-ju.
Korean subtitles by Han Hyo-ju. Korean subtitles, Han Hyo-ju. Korean subtitles by